I had no idea or plan or thought that I would ever write a memoir. And this event put me on this trajectory, and I ended up writing a personal narrative. And that's perhaps the one that you need to write too. I'm Brenda, this is Write Your Story, and on this channel we talk all things memoir. On today's Write Your Story, I'm going to talk about a form of memoir writing called personal narrative. Personal narrative is memoir, but not all memoir are personal narrative. And so that's where the confusion can come in and the blurring of the lines. And so we're going to look at what personal narrative is, which characteristics of memoir it has, and where it actually differs, and why you'd want to use personal narrative in your memoir writing. Let's first recap on memoir. Once we get the overall picture of memoir and how memoir works and the purpose of our memoir, we'll be able to then pull out personal narrative and see the similarities and the differences. So memoir is where you tell your life story through a particular lens, and that particular lens is really your theme. That's your focus of your memoir. And we tell our stories in order to come to understand something about ourselves and our lives. And through that universal theme, through that topic, that lens, that focus, we tell the reader about it too, so that the reader can actually draw something from our lives that they can apply to their lives. And so memoir runs, as we've done in other videos, the gamut of coming of age memoirs, travel memoirs. We do, of course, the difficult, heart-rending personal memoirs. We do celebrity memoirs if you happen to be a celebrity, and you don't have to be world famous, but you could be a celebrity in your particular field. There's all sorts of ways we could write our memoir depending on the lens and the theme we want to tell it through. The focus of memoir writing are the events of our lives that we've learned from. Personal narrative is different in that we don't look at our entire life as the starting point. Personal narrative looks at a defining event in our life that has had such an impact on us that it takes us back to look at our life, to see how we got to this place and what has brought us here and what we can learn from it and how we're going to go forward. Memoir is a retelling of our life and all the events. Personal narrative is birthed out of a particular event that's very defining for us. So in this regard, a grief memoir is usually a personal narrative. Grief memoir is usually the death of a loved one that has been so difficult, so traumatic. It has us evaluating life, it has us evaluating justice, truth, choices, and we go back through our life to actually evaluate how we came to this, who this person was to us who has died, that has created such a trauma for us, and how do we go forward? How do we understand life, and where do we go with it? Other defining events in our life can be divorce, postpartum depression, it can be a very traumatic abuse, anything like that that has happened in our life, and usually later in our life that we're going to use that as our starting point and go back and evaluate our life. And through that, we're going to ask really difficult life questions. Other forms of memoir that work really well for this are spiritual quest memoirs as well as faith-based memoirs. When you write a memoir, surprisingly, you don't have to write it in first person. For the most part, all memoirs really are, because we're telling our story from our perspective. But in personal narrative, it has to be in first person. It is a personal narrative, a personal telling, a personal story of this event in your life and how it has impacted you. Another difference between personal narrative and memoir is that with memoir, you tell the story, depict people and events, but really you leave the reader to draw their own conclusions. With personal narrative, you delve a lot into thoughts, opinions, feelings, emotions, It's an introspective memoir where you go deeper into who you are and you share what you think about things, how you feel about things. You may put your anger on the page. You express a lot of things that are introspective, that are related to feelings, opinions, and emotions, which you don't do in a traditional memoir. But it's a perfect venue to do this exploration in personal narrative. When I wrote my memoir, I wrote it to just get it out of my system, to put it on the page so that I could actually survive my grief. I didn't realize at the time that the process I went through and that the memoir I wrote actually qualifies as a personal narrative. It is a grief memoir. I write about the death of my mother and that pivotal event of how traumatic that turned out to be for me, to the point that it had me questioning my faith, because I wondered how God could let this happen. And so I started through this process of really understanding my relationship with my mother, who my mother was, why God would have allowed it to happen, what I thought about God, whether I actually even still believed in Him, whether my faith was actually one worth giving my life to, and whether Jesus was real. I started doubting all of that. And through that process, I also had to confront my relationship with my father. My father and I had always had a dysfunctional, distant relationship, completely opposite from the close relationship I had with my mother. And because my mother was gone first, I was left with my father. And now, how do I deal with him? How do I relate to him? How do I deal with all the pain and the hurt and the anger that comes up? And through telling the story, through working through it, by putting it on the page so that it lived outside of myself, I came to see my relationship with my father and my mother in a different light. And I also tell in my story the trajectory, the resolution, the development of the relationship of my father, because my mother was no longer there. And my memoir is actually a grief memoir and a healing memoir in my relationship with my faith, in my relationship of the trauma with my mother's death, but also in my relationship with my father and the misunderstanding that I explore through my writing, through my entire life with my father, until I get to the point of 2 weeks of his life after my mother died. So that is the personal narrative. You explore themes, you ask questions, you answer them. The reader is expecting you to delve introspectively into who you are and this trauma and this pain that has actually spurred you on. And through coming to that, your understanding of what life is for you. We do a lot of meaning of life introspection in a personal narrative. And that is what's expected by the reader. That's why they pick it up. They're asking those questions. They're wanting to know how you've worked it out for yourself. What have you come to in your conclusion? And what will they come to in their conclusion? They don't have to be the same. You're not trying to convince the reader to believe what you believe or to experience your pain the way you have to validate it. What you're doing is sharing with them your story. You're trying to make sense of it, and in reading your story, it will help them to resonate with their story and understand things about their life. And that's why people read grief memoir. It's why they read divorce memoir. It's why they read heartbreaking, difficult memoirs. For the most part, it's not the voyeurism of what happened in your life. It's what difficulty have you had in your life and how have you overcome it, so that I can translate that into my life, because I have difficulty. We all have difficulty in our lives. And how do I overcome the one in my life? So that is a real purpose and a function and a gift of personal narrative. If you're wanting to write a memoir where you're going to do an expose of your life in a very heartfelt, open way that asks questions and takes you on the trajectory of trying to find the answers. And it's pivotal because of one event in your life that has put you on this trajectory. The last comment about personal narrative, just like memoir, even though you're doing all this introspection and work, and I used a lot of my journals and excerpts from my journals in my writing and shared a lot of my thoughts, you do still in personal narrative need to follow a story arc. So you still need to develop that rising action where you have a plot, you have your rising action, you have your climax, your falling action, your resolution. It's not just a pure expose of your thoughts and ideas without any plan, structure, or resolution. There's still always, of course, the story arc that you're writing through, but the focus and the starting point are different from traditional memoir. I hope that has been helpful for you. If you have a burning question, put it in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them for you. If you're interested in my book, When God Says No, it's available on Amazon. And do subscribe and click on the notification bell if you're wanting to learn more about memoir writing.